Hi, this is Paula, Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole because we like to go into topics more deeply. And we're coming to you today from the fabulous Manhattan Neighborhood Network studios, and that's here at 537 West 59th. And what I'm hoping to do in the future, when I go live, which will be June 21st, is to not only have call-ins, but I actually want to have walk-ins so that you can walk down to these studios, join us in the audience, and if you have anything to say, like to my illustrious guest, Carl Pearson, you can say it in person.
That sounds great.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Carl, what's going on? You're running for Attorney General?
Yes, I am. And
can you tell us about it?
Today I would like to sort of expose what's going on. I've put together an outline of the things that I think people should know, and I believe that because they don't know these things, we're really not able to change what's going on. I think there's so much misinformation, and because of that, people are dubious about what they can or should do. They don't really know what's true and what's not.
Right.
And therefore, they sit back and wait for some leadership to try to tell them what to do. So that we had some leadership about a year ago, and the leadership fell apart. I mean, the person that was clearly the front runner won the national election, and the people got what they wanted. But the problem is that they didn't know what they were getting, and the truth of it is that they were disappointed, and for good reason.
As a good attorney, you were reaching a little beyond the horizon because you were aware of the effect of rhetoric.
Yes.
And you said, well, let's be patient and see. Could we right now put that roll-in of Norman Kurland talking about monopoly? Because what Carl is saying is so cosmic with what I was just thinking about. And then you'll see once we launch into it. Can you hit the apple, bring up the apple, and then the sound so we can hear?
New technologies, new rentable space. If you look at the average household, it's about $40,000 of income. And if you say, okay, what does that amount to, $40,000 of income? If you took a pile of $100 bills and stacked them up, it would be about a little over 1.5 inches high. Now, and then you look, and this represents 50% of the population. That's the median income. And then you go to 100,000, which represents about 95% of all families. And there, it's about 4 inches. Okay, about that high. And then you
95% of all families.
Yeah, families are that it's the top. It's the top 5%. The others are what I should have said.
That
less than 100. That would be less than $100,000. Would be 95% of your population.
Okay.
Okay. And then you go to $1 million, and there you got about 1/3 of 1%. And there you got a little over a yard high in stacks of $100 bills. Then you go to 1 billion. And there are about 300 billionaires in the United States, and that's about, it's over half a mile. It's about 1 kilometer high. And then you go to last year, there was a hedge fund operator who earned $3.7 billion in hedge fund profits.
Who was that, by the way?
John Paulson was his name. And there were about two others. George Soros earned a lot in hedge fund money. And if you look at $3.7 billion in a year. That's about about 2.3 miles high. Okay, and then if you go to a $10 billion, and there are people who earn that much. You're talking now about something about the size of Mount Everest. Okay, and then if you look, this is 10 billion. And then 50 billion, Bill Gates in 1 year increased his net assets by $50 billion.
Assets or income?
His assets. Well, you had capital gains,
okay.
so that it was an income. And that's roughly 31 miles high of $1 bills. Now you compare that to the world, where a very high percentage of the world's population live on $1 a day.
The reason that I wanted to bring that out was I felt that if you're talking about 31 miles high of $1 bills stacked up,
$100 bills.
Right, $100 bills stacked up, what must be the equivalent of knowledge? If knowledge is power, I think what you're talking and some other people who I'm attracted to have penetrated a lot of the illusion. That's how I wanted to frame what you're saying, what we don't know about. Like, it's not just money it's not just dollar bills or $100 bills that we don't have that can reach Mount Everest or 31 miles high. There must surely be knowledge that we don't even know. Well, and the institutions that we're trusting to give us aren't doing it.
Let me go back with my own experience and tell you how I came up with this problem that you're trying to describe. And the way I view it is that years ago, I saw that those people who were able to raise money were very influential in our economy because they're the ones who gave money to business people in order to allow them to grow a business. So if you couldn't get an investment banker or a brokerage firm to finance you, you couldn't get financing at all. So that the people who had the license to be a brokerage firm were the ones who allocated capital in America. If you couldn't get a license, then you couldn't allocate capital. You would be prohibited from dealing in securities unless you had a license. So at the outset, we've licensed people who will then anoint others to become successful. Those licenses have turned into these investment bankers. They've turned into unlicensed people with all that capital. Now said, well, it's fine having a license and all that capital, but the license really creates obligations. Is there any way that we can bypass the licensing? So they set up hedge funds. Hedge funds was a way that the licensed banks and licensed securities firms could avoid any further regulation by taking the money that they were licensed to raise, hand it over to themselves as hedge funds, and now they're free and clear of any regulation at all to steal as much as they could, which they've done.
The original idea of a license is to make sure that there's responsibility
that
back to the public, that's giving them that privilege to have a type of monopoly. Isn't a license a type of monopoly?
Licensing started out years ago, and maybe even before that, in the Greek marketplace, in the Stoa. And the Greeks authorized by license a person to sell black olives at one end, and someone else was licensed to sell green olives at the other end.
Really?
And if they dared sell the wrong color olive, they could be executed for defying the whoever.
Not executed.
Well, they had severe punishments
because
this was a state-given monopoly in the marketplace where you could only buy your olives from these people. You either bought green olives or black olives, and they had the monopoly given by the state. So the state took a cut.
So the state wanted to make sure it got its cut.
Well, the royal whoever gets their cut. They do it by giving away a license to their friends.
Right.
The same way that Aqueduct is going to be another license.
But in return, the people are convinced that they need to buy from licensed people because they're being protected, right? They're not going to have bad olives or...
Well, they don't have anyone else to buy from. A license presupposes that if you don't have a license, you can't sell.
Right.
So there's only one seller of green olives in the marketplace, and you pay whatever they charge.
Right. But if you pay whatever they charge and you're giving them that privilege to have the license, what do you get in return for doing that?
Well, you remain an alive citizen. If you object, it may be that you'll be a dead citizen.
But no, at the beginning, to convince people, the way when I was reading Henry George, he said that originally...
Might makes right. Whoever has the guns sets the law.
Yeah, but that can make us too cynical. I mean, originally, you have to convince the people to give you the power, to give you, so you can amalgamate that might. And from what I understand in reading Henry George in the way old days, that real estate law is such that the feudal lord was responsible for protecting your farm, that the raiders or another tribe wouldn't come in and take your crops at the last minute. So in return for giving him your taxes or your rent, he was supposed to organize the army to protect you. But he said today, because we're so cut away from real estate law, we even have to take the army out of wages, so it's very out of kilter.
Well, there's a relationship between politics and military, and they interplay with each other. In other words, if the political aspect fails, you use the army to achieve a political result. They're intertwined. And in this country, we have the army.
But if the army mutinies, that has happened through history.
It's happened, and you try to pay your army well. You keep them, the elite of the country. It's part of the obligation of the wealthy to join the army and be the leaders. Whether you're trained or not to be a leader doesn't really matter. You're in charge. So, what we have in this country is recognition that licensing is a way of paying off people to do what you want. And it all leads up to VIG. Licensing is intertwined with VIG, vigorish. This country, as well as most other countries, have a way of allocating money to the insiders and stealing it from the rest of the people. So I call that vigorish. Was in reference to the way the mafia, on its loan sharking, would charge VIG, so that if you borrowed $100, you had to repay it at $10 a week forever, maybe.
I remember in another show I said, "Isn't that usury?" And you said they probably didn't know what that word meant.
Right. Well,
but it's usury.
Well, usury is another form of VIG. And monopolies allow the marketplace to sell green olives at more than they should. So any kind of exclusive licensing, any kind of monopolies, any kind of armaments where they're custom made and only one firm can make that particular armament according to the specifications that Congress put in there, which meant that only one firm could get the contract. That's monopoly. Trademarks are monopolies. Copyrights are monopolies, patents are monopolies, licensing are monopolies, monopolies are monopolies. All of this, and unions are monopolies. Tenure is a monopoly. College universities that are licensed, accredited, and degree granting are monopolies. Every one of these people draw money from the public in excess of what they would in a competitive arena. So that it's come to the point now where we no longer have any money left. We're having to give VIG to so many different people.
So the pendulum has swung to the extreme, because in the past we've had anti-monopoly laws, so we must realize
we haven't enforced them, and we even
in the past we did that.
Yeah,
I mean, how did we get them in the
up
first
until
place?
Nixon, up until Richard Nixon, we enforced the law.
I see.
Richard Nixon came in and he ordered a non-enforcement of law, and that's when Walmart got started. Walmart started violating the law by buying at a lower price than its competitors were buying.
I think he might have been enchanted with private industry or private enterprise from binary economics, because I heard he said something positive about that. But if you don't bring the whole program into play, then you get the alarming problems you're talking about.
Well, the problems that we have in America could have been simply avoided by law enforcement.
Because we had the laws in place.
We have the laws in place.
Now, who
we
put them
did
in
it
place?
at one time.
Tell us about
starting
those
with
great
Nixon.
moments.
Starting with Nixon, he said, "Don't enforce the law."
No, not when they're violated.
Okay.
For people who don't have history, because I know you're going to talk about what we don't know.
Okay.
What was a great moment in American history when we realized monopoly was a problem?
Well, we knew from the days of the railroads had monopolies, and we knew from the oil interests, the Rockefellers, that we passed the antitrust statute.
What year was that?
In 1898, I believe, was a year that we recognized that we needed some kind of antitrust laws, and we've enforced the antitrust laws up to a point. But with Nixon coming in, law enforcement really pretty much stopped, and the people that had money were in charge, and they made sure that the people who were elected were not going to enforce the law, which allowed the rich to get richer because they could violate the laws with impunity, whereas other people would have the laws enforced against them.
I'm going to ask Norman Kurland in that time of Nixon where the $100 bill stacked.
There was a real good distribution of income. There was not any wild distribution as it is now. Now it's just horrendous. The distribution is such, and it's caused by allowing the money changers in the temple to sell gambling contracts that are illegal under law. They're purely gambling contracts. There's no. They don't make anything.
When you say temple, you're being facetious.
Well,
because
they're money changers. The usury was prohibited, but people would money change in the temples in violation of religious law, and people were thrown out of the temples for being money changers years ago, according to history.
And then they got lax on it, and Jesus got angry and he kicked over. Is that the story?
We had laws in this country prohibiting usury. In New York State, we have a law right now that says usury is the payment on a loan of 16% or more. So that's usurious. So the banks are charging through their credit cards 31%. And it's usurious. It's illegal under New York law.
How did they get away with it?
They got away with it because they went to 2 states that decided to attract this kind of business. They would eliminate all laws prohibiting usury.
Wow.
So South Dakota and Delaware are open states where there's no usury law.
Right.
So the banking industry, the credit card particularly, went to those 2 states and incorporated there. So now under federal law with the interstate commerce protection, the protection for people in interstate commerce from being regulated by the individual states, because that would break up their national monopoly on giving usury. So nobody in government wants to ensure that the thieves lose their money. So the congressmen that we've elected allow the banks to do what they're doing. They allow it. They're by not changing the law, they're allowing the banks to charge usurious rates that are stealing money from you and me.
Not changing the law on a state level or
federal level. It has to be done federally because the federal government has taken control of banks and credit card companies and the rates of interest that they charge.
And yet they're using a few states.
Well, they're allowing one state, Delaware, or another, South Dakota, to have zero protection for their public, and that lack of protection is now provided throughout the entire nation because of the Interstate Commerce Clause.
Cursing the entire nation.
It's awful. I mean, but our congressmen could do something about it. They know about it. They certainly, unless they're getting favorable rates from their credit card companies, they know that they're paying 30% interest. But they're not doing anything about it because they are paid. They're bought lock, stock, and barrel by these interests.
Right.
The banking interests, whether they're American or not, makes no difference. They're really not American. They're foreign interests that control the U.S. government.
Right.
They're not American.
And our government is too weak to throw
Well,
it
our
off.
government is them. We have been bought. They bought our government.
Right.
So we are controlled by the banking interests that have nothing to do with America.
Have we ever gone through a cycle like this in the past?
I don't
that
believe
American
so.
spirit
I don't believe so. We tried to avoid entangling alliances. We were given warning of the military-industrial complex. We should have been should have been added to that. This is what Eisenhower warned us when he left office. But the government has been taken over by people that aren't even American. They're foreign interests that control the government by giving money to those people who will do what they want. So what they want is to be able to charge usurious rates, to be able to take American property by foreclosure, and now it becomes owned by a foreign bank. So we have the foreigners grabbing up our property in America by foreclosure and by purchasing these properties. We're losing our rights in America.
You know the heartache of this because many of your clients have to go through bankruptcy and lose their properties.
But people don't understand any of this. If they only knew if they knew what I would like to tell them.
Okay.
And I have sort of outlined it. I've outlined it.
Let's launch into your campaign about what people don't know and they should know.
Okay. First of all, what the people need to know is too complicated for anyone to get right away. It took me years to come to a conclusion.
And you're a Harvard graduate.
Right.
So.
And so, I mean, it takes years to really put it all together. So in a short soundbite that's allowed on television of 7 or 15 seconds, you can't possibly begin to learn anything at all. So they don't even try. Our media does not, the main media doesn't help at all. They hurt. They mislead people. That's part of the program, to make sure that the people don't learn anything. If they had the knowledge, Americans would do the right thing, but they don't know what's going on. They're afraid to act without knowledge. They don't want to jump into something and be stupid because they've jumped into the wrong thing.
Right.
So those
you
of us
for an
who are
investment?
No, just from a political standpoint, if you're not sure, well, you'll just do traditionally what everyone else seems to be doing because you're not sure. You don't want to be stupid and jump out and try to do something to correct the problem because you might be criticized by your neighbors who you don't know are really stupid. They don't know what's going on either. You don't know, and they don't know.
But you all pretend to know.
But you want to, you pretend
go along
you know.
With the crowd.
You go along with the crowd. So the people are afraid to act because they don't have the knowledge. Wouldn't it be then in the best interest of those that control the government not to allow information out? Well, that's what's happening.
If they want to continue with their scamming.
and increase what they're doing, they're going to have less and less information. So how
can you increase what you're doing? You're killing
Well,
people.
they
you're
are, but they don't care.
Industry,
They get the money.
You're killing the economy.
They don't care. They have the money. They're not killing themselves. They're killing you. The economy hurts you, not them.
How happy can you be on the top of Mount Everest with just you and a couple other people?
Why? If you live in China, what do you care about America?
Because everyone around you is slaves. Who wants to keep company with slaves?
But the people with money don't have to live here. They have their own gated communities.
But then
they don't wait in lines.
They may have gated communities, but they have paid friends. That's what you're going to have.
Look, they have all the money. You have 300 billionaires in America.
Money doesn't buy everything, Carl.
Well,
doesn't buy love.
What we have to do is recognize what they're doing and then see what we can do about it. So I think I recognize what they're doing.
Okay, great.
So, first of all, one of the things that they have to do, I would suspect, is to have a dumbing down of education. In what way can they dumb down education to make sure that the rank-and-file person in America doesn't find out what's going on? Wouldn't you do exactly what they're doing right now?
You mean have not very exciting curriculums?
Right. Have
teachers
people,
that are just punching the clock.
Have people that don't graduate from high school. People that can't read when they graduate from high school. have the teachers not having any incentive to teach. Being unable to get rid of bad teachers, having unions and teachers that are overpaid that really don't have to work, will sit in a rubber room getting paid, having students that will dance all day instead of learning, having no incentives for students. But why should a student learn anyway? There's no jobs.
Right.
So the whole thing is a system
that's the most heartbreaking
part.
Well,
it's only part of it. It's just part of the overall system. But they control the media.
But parents send their kids to prestigious schools. The most they can afford, they go into debt.
The rich do.
In hopes that they'll find...
The rich do.
But even they don't find a job. That's what I'm saying.
Well, some do and some don't. But if you're political, you can get a job.
Oh, I see.
Do you know what a conductor on the Long Island Railroad gets per year for punching tickets? $85,000 a year plus benefits.
Yeah.
$85,000 a year to punch a ticket?
Right.
I mean, what's going on?
Right.
This is a VIG. That's an example of a VIG. The people who are getting VIG don't want the change. They're in control.
I heard it's packing the wage base with welfare and redistribution methods so that you don't see that the system's out of control.
The people that get VIG don't want the change. Mm-hmm. And the rest of us aren't allowed to communicate with each other. We're not learning about the VIG, all the excess money that some people are getting from the system, abusing the system. If we have a job, we're happy. We don't want to lose it. We don't want to complain, right? If we complain, we may lose what little thing we have.
Right.
People don't know what to do. They're really they're up against the wall and don't have any leadership because the leadership has turned out to be a false leadership.
We're 24 minutes into 58 minutes.
Okay.
When you go through your points, can we leave some time to discuss what justice and courts can do about this?
Sure. Well, probably not very much, but
I know, but I want you to spell it out.
We'll go into that.
Yeah.
But another thing is that the people that get the VIG control our educational system. They don't allow competition from private schools. Private schools would have an easier time telling the truth. and they don't want the truth to be known. They want the VIG to be continued. So there's the states excessively control private education. In India, for example, the educational system is controlled by a bureaucracy, and for that reason, most of the people are not given the kind of education they could get. But there are 7 universities in India which have broken free from that, and they're called the India Institutes of Technology. And I found out through research, they broke free from this bureaucracy, which is horrendous in India, by the allocation of money to them. It was done without any strings at all. By the people that are paying.
How fascinating.
Yeah, so they became the world-class university by leaving them alone.
And that probably made their country great.
That did. It
because
created.
India is really excelling.
Because those people are in great demand. The PhDs from the 7 institutes of technology, very few people can get into them because most of the people in India have to go to the lesser schools. Most of the people in America have to go to the lesser schools. There's a few schools that are a little bit better, but we don't allow competition in the school business. Don't forget, I owned a school and ran it for 18 years. I'm talking from experience now. I've been licensed, I've been accredited, I've had the ability to grant these certificates, and I've had accreditation, licensing, and government student loans. I've gone through the whole thing. I know the school business intimately, very intimately after 18 years. It is horrendous what they're doing to education by not allowing competition. That's what they're doing. They're not allowing competition. Every time you
created your own career.
Every time you hear
paralegal.
people talking about reform in education, they're all. It's a joke. The reform has got to be competition. There's nothing else. Allow education to compete, and you will get a world-class system.
So
but
in
as
other words,
long as you regulate it, you're not going to have it.
So a prospective student would want to go to a college or university where he sees that other people are getting jobs and making their way better, or not getting jobs and getting capital ownership and corporate financing.
It doesn't work because the system now in America has a cost base for an education that exceeds the value that education gives.
Right.
And that's caused by...
Let me spell that out, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
That means that after you graduate from college, you're burdened with such a huge debt that any future employer is wary about employing you because you've got to get 3 other jobs. You're going to be an exhausted employee.
That's part of it, but even when you get a job, you're not going to be able to repay the loan. So we have a whole nation of slaves where the banks, as a payoff to Bush, the first statute that Bush II enacted when he was elected was to outlaw bankruptcy for student loans. That was a payoff to the banks that got him elected with a contribution. So basically, if the banks gave Bush II $1 million, let's say, maybe $500,000 in campaign financing, he rewarded them with $10 trillion in student loans that couldn't be bankrupted. The payoffs are so enormous.
Right.
For such little money. Our people sell out for such little amounts.
Well, that's because they've got student loans to pay.
Well, the problem is that...
right, Carl? They probably went to Harvard or Yale, and they got student loans to pay off.
They probably got exempted from them. But the politicians...
But I mean, that's still...
politicians are selling out for $1 that they receive. They give away anywhere from $1,000 to $1 million of our money.
Well, why do people do that, Carl?
Because because there's glamour in being an elected official.
But that
because
glamour
the
is so
newspapers,
short-lived.
It's
so short-lived.
It's as long as that politician lives, even
as
if
long
he's
as
short.
He keeps making dirty
even if
deals.
he's a short politician. He's the politician. And who do the newspapers respect? They don't respect the truth. They respect the short politician. Anything he or she might say is news, even if it isn't, even if it's false. Because the media does that. The media is owned by these people.
Okay.
He owns the media.
How do you stay so optimistic and you keep coming up with workaround solutions, having seen so much heartbreak?
It isn't heartbreak. You have to know it's too complicated for anyone to grasp, and that's part of the problem.
So you're not heartbroken because you can't grasp it?
The same way that derivatives were...
Ignorance is bliss, is what you're saying?
Well, we are in a state of ignorance, and we don't know what's going on, so we said, what can we do? We don't know. Let's wait. So I've been. It's taken a lifetime to figure out what's going on, but I now am pretty clear, I think, in what I see that is going on. And once you understand the problem, it's a lot easier to come up with a solution. If you don't know what the problem is, where do you start?
Right, just like
I
a doctor.
understand the problem.
You've got to diagnose the disease.
The problem is that at the top it's corrupt. Do you have any doubt about that?
No, I have no doubt.
Doesn't everyone agree that at the top it's corrupt?
If you would choose glamour over connection with your soul, service to the state, doing the right thing, having that enormously sacred responsibility of political office, then it's corrupt and sick.
I just bypass all of those issues. I see that there's a problem and I see a solution.
Okay.
I don't look at the in-between.
Okay, let's go
I
to
see
the
a solution.
Let's cut to the chase.
Okay. The solution...
I love it. We're sitting here on Rabbit Hole Central with the solution to these things.
It's a very simple solution, and that is that since the top is so corrupt, that for you or me to think that we would have any impact at all at the top is ludicrous. Those people that are running for the office and they're going to become congressmen, senators, and all that, they're going to join the problem. They're not going to cure it at all. They can't.
They don't want to be right.
Even if they had the best of intentions, there's no way they can do anything. So I had to figure out, where is there any place in politics where something could happen? So I decided, first of all, no. That was my first thing. I'm going to try to change it myself, if possible, without politics. And I developed a system that any town or village could become prosperous if it had the leadership of the town to sponsor it. I found no towns willing to sponsor becoming wealthy. Unbelievable, but they're all afraid of giving up their vig.
No.
I found one, and they weren't able to do it. I found one town.
Willing to become wealthy? They weren't willing to become wealthy?
Well, either the message doesn't get through to them, they have their position, they don't want to jeopardize it with some newcomer coming into town and doing things that they should have been doing. I don't know exactly where the obstacle is, but it's a point where any one town in America could become prosperous so easily, and yet none of them have come forward, except one where I tried it, and it became difficult when the mayor wasn't of the party, was an independent, not of the Democrat or Republican Party. But let's go back to that, because that's really the problem. We talk about monopolies. If you have one company that controls 5 different cab companies, each with a different name, black, yellow, orange, red, green cab companies. You have 5 cab companies, and each one with 20% of the business, so you don't have a monopoly. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. No, right. It's incorrect, because you have one person that controls all 5. Oh. So there's a monopoly because of the common control. If the 2 political parties are under common control of the banks, what do you have?
A monopoly, too.
What do you think about a monopoly in politics? Is it going to be good for the public?
No.
It's as simple as that. It's a monopoly in politics.
Right.
We didn't recognize it until recently, but it's dominated by the banking interests that control it all.
We also play a game called Monopoly, so it seems like Monopoly's okay.
Well,
it doesn't really have
it
doesn't have a stigma until you study it. You realize it's like a cancer out of control.
But if
it takes over everything.
If you only had a single party, you would know then that it's a monopoly. Mm-hmm. So they broke it into 2 parties with common ownership and control.
I thought the 2-party system came in after the Constitution. I thought every state voted for its favorite person, sent them to one central place. They picked the most popular.
Did Microsoft come in after the Constitution? I mean, doesn't any monopoly come in after the Constitution? So why would you think that a monopoly...
different for
our
it's no different.
It's a party. Political parties.
Right.
You can have, if you have a merger of all the churches, you would have a monopoly in that respect.
Interesting.
Talking about monopolies, NYU has just announced that it's going to expand its charter to every country in the world. They're going to not only take over Greenwich Village and wipe out Greenwich Village, but they're going to Adu, whatever that country is. They're taking money. Yeah, Adu, whatever it is. I can't even pronounce it.
Yeah.
I should know how to say it, but I can't. So they're taking the monopoly that was granted by New York State, where they're free to open up educational programs without review. Unlike you or me, if we had to open up just one little program, we have to go through several $100,000 at a minimum of cost. We have to wait 2 years. We have to have a fully loaded school with no students.
Wow.
I mean, they put such barriers on education. But NYU, as an accredited, licensed, degree-granting school, same in every state, they're free to go anywhere in the world and do anything they want with no licensing. And they can open up in other states. They open up, and they spread their educational content, which is not a good content. It's not one that we need, but they're licensed. They're approved. Their educational system is approved. So we have education that's approved, which doesn't help, or we have unapproved that can't get started. So we have to change the educational system. It has to be reformed. This is where I come in, because
20 minutes for the solution.
I can create a tuition-free equivalency college in any area of the country. And it would be free, a tuition-free equivalency college that will bring people up to a much higher level of education than they can get when they pay $50,000 a year to go to an accredited college.
You're going to really know what's going on, but a lot of people think, well, if you really know what's going on, then you're really going to be so disgusted you're not going to want to participate with the system and you won't be successful.
No, I understand where the freedom remains to undermine the system that isn't working. There's
so
certain areas that we can still work in.
Okay.
You can't try to become a congressman and change anything.
Right.
It doesn't work.
So in other words, your education is going to give people the tools to survive more successfully.
But success is very simple. You need to start at the bottom. You can't start at the top.
Okay.
You can't be an Obama and change things. Even if he had wanted to. I don't know if he wanted to or not, but he certainly isn't able to do it.
Well, binary economists feel that an Obama can make the change that will allow corporate credit to be extended to individuals. I know in courts when you're...
Are you saying that the bankers are going to pass a statute that's going to hurt them?
I'm saying if we're treated as corporations in courts, I still have to learn more about this.
You're trying to say that if the law changes, that we could have results. My feeling is we're not going to get those changes, so don't even bother to talk about what we could have if the crooks change the law.
I know, and I can see I hit a passionate, nerve with you there, and I think that's a good thing. But I do think that people have to identify themselves either as corporations or as sovereign individuals. And I think there's this sort of blurring, and people who understand about corporate credit, say a Lewis Kelso or whatever, I don't think he had any idea about the abuses taking place in the courts that you have seen. So if you can kind of merge both of these together, we can say that why do we take the abuse of one system without the benefit?
Corporations were granted the right to live as a creature of legislation.
Right.
The Supreme Court then gave them the rights of human beings. Human beings require food, sleep, and clothing. Corporations do not. They work 24 hours a day, and they have no conscience. They don't go to church, and they steal money all day long, some of them.
So you have more rights as a sovereign individual.
Well, the individual and the corporation have the same rights. The problem is that the rights that were given to the individuals were needed by individuals because they have human characteristics that need some replenishment.
I don't want
to... But we give the same rights to corporations that don't sleep.
Okay.
And they work 24 hours a day at stealing your money. Not all of them, some of them.
Right.
And there's no way of stopping them, because they aren't bound by any laws any longer. They're free to do anything they want.
I don't want to take you off topic, but I'd like to have you back on a show and have some of the binary economists call in on this point. Also, Joe Barton is going sur juris on his trial, and I think that this needs to be understood more, what that means.
Well, the one thing...
But I don't want to take you off, because I know you have things.
One thing that is very important is that every person on a jury has a right to vote the way he feels, even if he feels that the judge's instructions require him to do otherwise. A person on a jury has a right to come up with a just verdict, even though it goes against what the judge is saying.
This is incredible, Carl. I had no idea until...
That's jury nullification. But you're not allowed to tell the jury that. It's forbidden to tell a jury there will be a mistrial.
See, that's
Look
what
at
I'm
my website, jury nullification website.
Yeah, I mean,
have it all spelled out.
So when when you came in here and say, "I'm going to tell you on this hot
Yeah.
show everything that people don't know,"
Right.
that's a huge thing.
Of course it
that
is.
people don't
You're
know.
not allowed to tell them.
You know,
You
in
can't
eighth
tell
grade
a jury
civics,
that they're allowed to nullify the judge's instructions. It's
And-
against the law to say that the judge's instructions are not binding on the jury.
and it's
There's
probably
no contempt.
and it's probably against the law in a civics class of eighth graders
No, it
to
isn't.
tell them that.
No, it isn't.
Can you tell
no,
them
it
there?
isn't. Yes, you can.
You can.
They won't, though. They probably won't.
Why not?
It's too complicated.
Well, you had a list on
Okay, let me go
on
over it.
what a teacher is, how they're selected.
We have a two-party domination that's a monopoly because it's controlled by the same people. So we have a monopoly in politics. They have set up the laws where the backroom people can designate Lazio as the gubernatorial candidate without any signing of petitions. You and I met when I was signing petitions many years ago,
Right.
4 years ago.
Right.
For me to get on the ballot, I have to have petitions signed, and that makes it difficult because you can't get petitions signed that readily. It costs money and time, so that the
energy,
monopoly of
heartbreak.
politics doesn't have anyone opposing them. Nobody is able to get on the ballot in New York. New York is the worst state in the country to get on the ballot. Very imposing obstacles to try to get on the ballot. So I'm trying to overcome some of them right now. I hope to be on the ballot, but if I'm not on the ballot, it'll be because we in New York have allowed this situation to exist. There's a proposal now that will relax it a little bit, but forget it. Part of politics is to keep people like me or you off the ballot, and they're very successful in doing that.
Well, I deserve to be off the
So
ballot.
we have,
I rarely vote.
We have balloting, we have balloting intervals of every 4 years. So every 4 years we have a couple of months in which we can say, oh boy, we're really going to get them now. So now that we have them with Obama, we have 4 years to wait out Obama to have Obama 2 come along. Obama, for me, has been Bush 4. And the next Obama will be Bush 5. We're not going to change things at the top. We have to change it at the bottom. One thing we can do in New York State that no other state has, and that is that every town and village has the right to pass its own statutes through a ballot initiative. It's not a statewide ballot initiative such as you have in California with Prop 13 or whatever. Every town, any town, can have an initiative of saying that we want to have 4 new fire trucks, or we want to have a town attorney general elected, or we want to do whatever. They're allowed to do that by putting it on the ballot at the next general election. That is something that very few, maybe less than 1 out of 1,000 New Yorkers knows. But if we can have more ballot access and more political participation by people,
then voting's worthwhile.
The what?
Then voting would mean something.
Yeah, well, we can do that now.
Wow.
The mayor in Bloomberg,
I can become a believer.
Bloomberg overrode the ballot initiative in New York, which denied him a 3rd term. He overrode that. They passed a statute overriding it, which I think is unconstitutional.
Right.
But anyway, what we have in America is people that get too much money, and I call it the VIG. And the vigorish, comes from monopolies, munitions, and armaments that are so carefully positioned that only one company gets the contract, and they get huge amounts of money. The armaments part of our budget is sacrosanct. It's almost like Social Security. You don't change it. A very healthy percentage of our economy goes to a few people that way. Monopoly is the same way. Licenses, even a lawyer has VIG. A lawyer is licensed and others aren't. So we have an opportunity to earn VIG as a lawyer.
These guys are
Dentists earn VIG. And this is how society is broken up, so that enough people are given VIG that they're not going to oppose the system. They don't want to oppose it. They're afraid. Teachers have their VIG. Subway drivers have their VIG. Street cleaners have their VIG. A lot of people have VIG. People that aren't earning any money at all but are getting paid in welfare more than they probably should be getting get a kind of VIG as well. So when you start paying off all these different people...
At least you seem heartless. It's because they have no capital ownership and any other access to wealth.
Well, we're not... Well, here's the solution. There's really a quick solution is this, that at the local level, we have to train people to become self-reliant, self-employed, small business people to create jobs and opportunity locally. If we do that, we no longer are dependent upon asking the government to hire us or asking or hoping that Walmart as an employer of last resort will hire us. We really are better than that. We should be able to provide the services and the goods that the nation needs as self-employed small businesses acting locally and trying to avoid the VIG as much as possible. That's our solution to getting out of the VIG mess. We have too many VIGs and we don't have enough people working. We've got to avoid the VIG process and we've got to be self-employed. But we need to teach people. We need to have a school to teach people how to be self-employed. They don't know how. They've lost that training. We haven't shown them what to do. And the government is making a mistake, but then they know what they're doing. They don't want people to be self-employed. They want them to be dependent.
Because they get the taxes off them?
No, because the monopolies require that we have unemployment.
Oh,
you only make money with monopolies with unemployment.
So I just want to interject at this point. Because of this reason, I'd like to encourage people to support the sponsors of Rabbit Hole Central and the Concordia Foundation, because I think by having groups of people thinking about these things, like if you go down where I get my hair cut with Carol at 3 in the East Village, you can discuss some of these ideas there or find other people that are thinking in the same way. I had a man who is really good in the restaurant business. He was of Greek descent. I had him as a guest on my show, and I was delighted to see how educated he was. And I thought this could be an opportunity when we're kind of at a bar or something to keep discussing these ideas.
You want to know what the heart of being a Greek restaurant owner is?
What?
As I see it, a Greek restaurant owner is very, very sharp. When did they ever not own the real estate that the restaurant is in?
That's Chinese, too. I had a Chinese business partner. He said you have a 1 out of 30 chance of being successful in your business, so buy the real estate before you go into business. Then when you go out of business...
It's a taxpayer.
Yes.
The restaurant is only a taxpayer. To hold the real estate as long as you can to gain millions of dollars on the resale of the restaurant or the real estate, so that this is what I think a Greek restaurant owner is doing. He's just parking the real estate and holding on to it and paying for a lifetime of holding that real estate.
I think a lot of countries that went through a lot of traumas, undoubtedly because of monopoly too, came to this country and right away glommed onto real estate. And now we're beginning to see the intelligence of that. I mean, unless Georges can talk about how to redistribute the monopoly.
So real estate has, but then the real estate,
that's horrifying.
That is what caused.
It's just horrifying.
That has caused our problem now. But these are money changers. They didn't create any real estate. They merely subdivided it.
I may be going to the Supreme Court about my co-op situation, and you know who really led the way was Henry George, reading Progress and Poverty to try to unravel it, and then David Casavas illuminated. But anyway. Back to you.
So part of the problem that we're divided up with different interests, and as long as we pursue our different interests and we don't get together and pursue the common interest.
Get together with the sponsors.
Here, for example, do you know anyone that's really so into hemp or medical marijuana that he or she doesn't think of much else? Do you know any person that's like that thinks all the time?
I'm thinking a lot about it because of the cancer cures.
I'm describing you.
Yeah.
Right. But your problem is the same as someone else with a different problem. The problem is that
you're right.
That we're at the top. We're all.
Next week I'm homelessness because it is the same problem.
It's the same problem up here. I'm trying to bring everyone into the fold here. That whatever problems you have, we can solve if you understand the basic problem.
Right.
Politically, the country has been sold out to the money changers. They grab anything they can, and through drugs they want the war on drugs because there's big money there. The pharmaceuticals want that. The law enforcement people, like incarceration, the judges, everyone has an angle here, so that the mere fact that drugs could be free and would eliminate all those problems, they would say, don't do that. You would ruin it. You would have to release everyone in jail. How can you possibly do that? We'll lose our jobs. The judges, we won't need as many judges. We won't need as many people in corrections.
Right.
Lawyers. I mean, my God, the whole economy is based on drugs.
Right.
How can you say that we can't use drugs?
But we don't teach that in school.
But well, who sets the curriculum?
Who?
The establishment.
Right, okay.
So if we had freedom in schooling, we would learn this. So if we have a tuition-free equivalency college, you can learn a lot more.
I think a lot of people know this. I think in California, the whole marijuana thing has been underground, so I think even little kids understand this, that you just have to pay the VIG along the way. Well, and I have a feeling now in California, even if they pass the law to completely legalize it, I think you're always going to have that state versus federal, ensure that the rich guys are going to get off and the same blacks and Hispanics are going to go to jail.
I think we've got to go back to basics, and if we can reform one town, I think that in the long run, that reform will spread throughout the country and it will eliminate the VIG. But we've got to eliminate VIG from the bottom up.
So you're
not going to do it at the top down.
So you've got to find a town.
I'm running for Attorney General. I'm going to have an ability to create this kind of town for every town in New York if I win. So it's an information system. You need to supply information to townspeople to know what to do.
So you're going to hit the campaign trail.
Oh yeah. So I can affect the town even if I'm not elected. The things that I know that should be.
Who else is going around the state? You know, what do they call it? Not
proselytizing?
No, not proselytizing. You know, when they were at the back of the train.
Oh yeah, they campaign.
The whistle stop tour.
Whistle stop tour. By a truck.
And we'll get a stream going.
Oh, absolutely.
I just want to say at this point, I'm going to try to be at the Joe Barton trial on the 28th in Kingston, New York, and I'm going to be streaming either from freedomfirstparty.org, that's his website, or else I'll kick up rabbitholecentral.tv again. But once we get the streaming technology down, I definitely want to be following your campaign, and if I'm going out live every day, maybe we can figure out a way to patch it through.
Terrific.
So that people in different towns can see how Manhattan people are thinking. Because I think a lot of times people upstate think that Manhattan is a whole nother universe. And likewise, Manhattan people, I think they think they're more cosmopolitan and aware than they actually are. So
I'm looking forward to a campaign that's going to tell people what they need to know to break free of the problems that we have, and the solutions are here, but the solutions are within us. We don't need any new statutes at all. Believe it or not, we don't need a single new statute.
You just need someone to enforce it.
We can work with what we have.
So that's why you say city or town attorney general is the new sheriff in town?
A new sheriff in town with a law book instead of a gun.
Right.
Where the people with the guns have not prevented the theft that's occurred. So if you had enforcement of law that is a law book, a sheriff with a law book could have stopped this. And Spitzer should have stopped it, Cuomo should have stopped it, but Cuomo started it.
Right. You know, you never hear of a sheriff in a sort of a metropolitan area. I never heard of it in Berkeley.
They pick up cars for ticketing. That's all that they do, and they oust people from their homes.
And yet it's exactly when I was having my problem in the housing court.
They get poundage, by the way. They get 5% of whatever they take from the cash register.
You're kidding?
No, it's called poundage.
The sheriff would have had.
The sheriff gets 5%.
Oh, for the car, but not for my co-op.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Who knows? We'll have to look into that.
When they collect on a judgment, they keep 5% for themselves. That's why if you have a judgment of $100, the sheriff laughs at you. He's not going to go out for $5.
You know, I was at the Surrogate Court, which is a beautiful building, and they have the comptroller. He has little celebrations now and then, you know, for Greek time and Chinese time, and they have pretty good food down there. So I bicycle down and listen to the talks, and sometimes videotape, put it up on my show. So once I was waiting around, and I started going up the steps, and I just loved the architecture. It's marble, and as you go up higher, it's not as elaborate, the tiling. Pretty soon I hit the top, and the top wasn't even locked, and I found these old laws or things that had passed through,
probably the books
that all moldy and falling apart, like 1802, and it just, what a history.
Yeah,
What a
31
legacy.
Chamber Street.
Yeah, 31 Chamber.
Yeah.
And along the way of going up the steps, I found the sheriff's office. And it looked kind of part of that patina.
Yeah.
But when you talk about a town or city attorney general and someone that will enforce laws, it's so
At
exciting.
government expense, by the way. The prosecutors enforce your duty at public expense, and we have excessive prosecutions as a
Right.
result. But no one's enforcing our rights. So
Right.
what I'm trying to do is to have excessive enforcement of our rights to try to get back to where we should be.
Talk about balancing that out, because you were talking to Joe Barton about the prosecutor. What does a prosecutor really mean? Most people, most of my viewers have never been in front of a prosecutor.
Elected locally at the county level. They act for the state. It's a People versus Smith in a criminal proceeding. The prosecutor is a state official, even though he's paid by the county. And he enforces law as an attorney general would enforce civil law. The prosecutor at the county level enforces criminal law. It's not an attorney general function. The attorney general should be enforcing our rights, enforcing the civil law.
Can prosecutors ever prosecute their conscience?
Well, what they do is that they have a right to not have a conscience. They have
a right to not have
immunity.
a conscience.
They're not required to prosecute at all. They're arbitrary. They can select who to prosecute.
Because if it's too heartbreaking,
they prosecute people to some extent that will give them the ability to run for higher office. So they easy marks.
You mean
small people rather than big people. You wouldn't prosecute a bank because they could kick the crap out of you.
Right.
So you prosecute somebody that has no money. But they take the money at the outset. They take a person's money at the outset so he can't defend himself or herself.
Right.
And then they have these criminal charges that they reveal, and they do a perp walk, and now they have a 100% criminal conviction record, and they go to the public and say, I am so good that I got a 100% criminal conviction. But they fail to tell you that 80% of those people would not have been convicted if they had a fair trial. They're not given a trial.
Do you think it's as high as 80%?
Even
if it's
yes.
50, even
Probably
if it's 20,
yes.
that's still sad.
If you had a fair discovery, a fair trial,
right.
we don't want a system where everyone who's guilty is convicted. That is so wrong because too many innocent people would go.
Isn't the message, the subtle message is if you don't plea bargain, you're going to be screwed, and don't get a jury?
The judge tells you this, look, I'm obliged to give you 30 years if you go to trial and you lose. You're probably going to lose at trial because you can't win. So the prosecutor...
You can't win because we don't tell the jury that they can vote their conscience.
The jury feels that the prosecutor must have a case. Why would he have prosecuted otherwise?
Right.
And they deprive you of a lot of
valuable information.
You don't have any money for experts. You don't have any money for investigation. So you're up against the wall anyway, and the prosecutor is able to bribe people to testify against you by giving them years off of their sentence. So that it's hopeless. You have to plead guilty. Once you are selected for prosecution, you have to plead guilty.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Carl Pearson is running for New York Attorney General, and I think that he has an affection for public access, and thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I think we can change things with a political movement.
A person on a jury has a right to come up with a just verdict, even though it goes against what the judge is saying. But you're not allowed to tell the jury that.
Let's take the case of housing. There was no moment in the history of the world prior to this one when we had the massive capability of building houses of the highest quality, the greatest beauty, the greatest durability, and the lowest cost. And yet, great bulk of people who once could have had houses can't have them anymore.